Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
On this edition of Bloomberg Intelligence, we bring you some of the best conversations from our Bloomberg Power Players event in New York. We brought together some of the world's most influential voices in the business of sports.
Today, we'll look at whether we're set for a major change in all areas of college sports.
Plus, we'll discuss what comes next as women's soccer hits the mainstream.
But first, we're going to dive into a conversation with David Rubenstein, co-founder and co-chairman of the Carlyle Group. He's also principal owner of the Baltimore Orioles. Now, he was joined by Cal Ripken Jr., Baseball Hall of Famer and founder and partner of Ripken Baseball.
They discussed their connection to the Orioles and the city of Baltimore.
First, we asked David why he even bought the Baltimore Orioles.
Well, in this case, I grew up in Baltimore, and I wanted to give back to Baltimore a bit, and I thought the team could maybe use rejuvenation in some way, and it's part of rebirth of Baltimore. Baltimore is trying to rebuild itself in many ways from some of the struggles it's had, and I thought a new ownership group would probably be helpful, so I did it for that reason, and obviously I hope to make money as well for myself and my investors, but it's more of a philanthropic thing on my part than anything else.
And Alex, he's got a few partners there, including Mr. Bloomberg, who owns this radio program.
How
about that?
How about that?
How about
Circular
that?
forces.
Exactly. All comes back together. Cal, talk to us about the Orioles. Boy, man, I'm a Yankees fan, so I'm looking at them every day. Man, they look good. Tell us about this team.
It's an exciting young team to watch, talent all over the place. We've had little problems with injuries in our pitching staff, but when you have a deeper minor league system, sometimes when somebody gets hurt, it's an opportunity for someone else. So they're playing really well. And it's interesting when many owners come in to buy a team, the thing they have to fix is what's happening on the field. In our particular case, that's the best part about the investment is that Mike Elias has done a really good job of creating an environment, a culture that knows how to win, knows how to play, and he's put talent in the system. So the good part is you just take your hands off of it and say, just keep going. And hopefully the luck factor with David will, in the very first year, we'll take that all the way to the World Series.
Can I ask a really dumb question?
Yes.
Why is investing in sports like a good business? And I say that because at some point we're going to reach the top, right? Like there's so much money coming in. How do you know that?
Well, over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been very difficult for somebody to buy a major league professional sport operation and lose money. People have made staggering sums. Now, of course, that tends to attract more money, and as you suggest, at some point there's always a peak. But right now, the interest in sports is so dynamic that the live television, despite your view and my view that live television should focus on interview shows, actually it focuses on live sports. And live sports is what's keeping television alive, really. So if you take a look at the NFL, for example, I think of the 50 most watched television shows last year, 45 of them were NFL games. And now baseball sees a lot of people, has a lot of people watching as well. So there's a view that as the population increases and as other things seem to be less attractive, sports is still very, very attractive. And so the TV contracts are going up. And as a result, for example, the NBA just negotiated $77 billion worth of contracts. It's expected in 2 years that the NFL will top that number. So that's what is driving it. And also it's a global phenomenon. People now are buying sports teams not only in their own country, but everywhere in the world. And so it's really not just a U.S. phenomenon.
So can I have a simple, all you have to do is to look at the health of sports is to look at the salaries of the players.
Yeah.
And I guess I've become one of those players saying, man, I wish I played in this era.
It always goes up. I mean, I'm like everybody else. It's got to top out somewhere, yet it just keeps going higher. Cal, how has the game on the field changed? The kids today that you watch at Camden Yards, still, by the way, I would argue one of the best parks in Major League Baseball, 25 years on. But how's the game changed today versus when you played?
Well, I mean, the analytics have taken over, and all the data and all the information. And I was an analytical player, And I took the data from, but there was no way that I was getting all the sort of data that you can get now. And the trick is, and this is the fun part about learning, the game hasn't changed much because the diamond's the same, the bases are the same, the mound's the same. The game is played the same way. But with all this influx of new data, teams feel that they have an advantage when they extract some of the data and then use that to help them play in the game. But the secret is, how do you give the data to a player to make him a better player? And that's the part that I'm having fun with, is learning what the data affects the philosophy of how you play the game. And that's changed. And positioning on the field, different old philosophies have kind of gone out the window because they've been proven not to be effective. So it's interesting to watch the game from that perspective, but it is all about the data, the numbers. They track everything that moves on that field.
It's amazing, and that's AI, that's big data coming into sports. And Alex, I'm sure you know this, but Cal has he has a little record out there. He played a lot of games in a row. He never took a day off. Okay,
okay.
That is something that just. It'll never be broken now.
So
given the way it's
I wish
changed.
I was wearing probes or something that could figure out how I could do that, because I'm asked all the time, how in the world do you play all those games in a row? And I don't know.
Well, I guess my question would be, with the analytics, that's never going to happen again. Not even going to get close.
Well, I think they're predicting now, at least in a medical sort of way, when that you might be inclined to have an injury.
Right.
And so if they start to think that you might have an injury, then they put you on the list a little early, the injury list a little early, and they're looking at the long term as opposed to the short term. But
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
There's the one thing that's hard to measure is what's inside your heart. I mean, your guts and how you go out about playing the game, how you compete. That's not measurable right now. And I think that's what drove me is, when you're an everyday player, the definition of an everyday player when I played was every day. I had the body type in which to do it. I healed really well, and I could play through pain. And when you find out that you can play through being less than 100%, because I would argue that even if you play 140 games, you're still playing at less than 100%. Maybe the only time you're 100% is the first day of spring training.
Right.
And then you end up moving towards the year. So that's the hard part where that's not measurable.
Yep.
And I like to see players that push through and force themselves to play every game to see how they do it.
You don't see that too much anymore. Hey, David, and aside from the Orioles, you've got a day job here, co-founder and co-chairman of the Carlyle Group. Perfect time to ask you this question. I know you bought the Orioles as an individual, as part of a partnership.
Right.
Now private equity, the NFL has allowed private equity
That's
to
correct.
come in as part ownership. What do you think about that?
Well, Carlyle is one of the groups that's permitted, so I guess I am happy for it.
Yes.
I think that it was inevitable because the prices of NFL teams have gone up so much that it's very difficult to find somebody by himself or herself who can buy a team any longer. The last team that was sold, the Washington Commanders, went for $6 billion. It's a large amount of money. Very few people can buy that by themselves. So you need to have a consortium of people to do this, and private equity is a big pot of capital sitting there. But the deals are ones where you have to be 10%, no involvement in the day-to-day management, and you have to hold for at least 6 years. So NFL is experimenting. We'll see how it goes.
So, Cal, you have had minor league investments, but this is the first time that both of you have had major league investments. How did this come about? Like, how did the partnership come about? How's it going? Walk us through it.
Well, the owner of the team for the last 30 years was the Angelos family. I had talked to them over last summer about a possible sale, and it came to be, but I wanted to have people in the consortium that were more connected to Baltimore and baseball than maybe I was, because I had grown up in Baltimore, but I haven't lived there for a while. So I talked to a number of people in Baltimore and some of the people who were also connected with the Orioles. And obviously the first call I made was to Cal Ripken. He said he would like to invest and also help us in other ways, which he's doing. So I think it's worked out quite well, and win-win for Baltimore and for our
And Cal, that was like
team.
a no-brainer for you? Picked up the call, you're like, yep,
absolutely no-brainer. I felt like I've been an Oriole through and through my whole life. I mean, I grew up in and around the Baltimore area. My dad was in with the Orioles. The first 14 years of my life, he was a minor league manager. And then you have a dream to be a player. You get drafted by the team you want to get drafted by. You play your whole career with that team. So I know that I went off for a little while, and you buy minor league teams, you learn about business in other ways. You put your head down. You don't pay much attention to what's happening at the Orioles. But when David called, it was an opportunity to get back in, to look at it from the inside, looking out. And I'm really surprised that I'm way into it now. I used to think the whole world revolved around baseball, and then you get out and you realize it doesn't. But then now it seems like the world revolves around baseball again.
Of course. And to put it in context for those who don't know the record, Lou Gehrig played in 2,130 consecutive games. People thought that was the unbreakable record. Cal Ripken did 2,632 games over 17 years, not missing one day. And all of us who work day to day for a living in non-athletic things, can you imagine going to work 17 years in a row without missing
Paul totally
a day?
I
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cal, what do you think the Orioles need to work on over the next couple of years here? Again, I'm looking at the record. The record is great. What do you think they need to work on? Is it minor league? Is it?
No. We have a minor league that's stocked with talent, and you can only. I mean, if you develop 3 shortstops in the minor leagues, you can only play one of them. So many times the talent that you have in the minor leagues is used to trade to get the pieces that you need at the big league level, and the Orioles are in good position for that. They have young players that are going to be superstars, that are already superstars, and maybe the biggest challenge in the future is how do you keep them?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no salary cap here, so it's tough,
like you pay 'em,
tough
right?
to keep the star players, right?
Yes. Unlike football or basketball, there's no salary cap in professional baseball, so you can get contracts that are as high as $700 million. And so it's hard for smaller cities to compete in that domain somewhat.
Our thanks to David Rubenstein and Cal Ripken Jr.
Coming up, we're going to break down how NASCAR is trying to build audiences in a conversation with its president, Steve Phelps.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio, providing in-depth research and data on 2,000 companies and 130 industries. You can access Bloomberg Intelligence via BI Go on the terminal. I'm Paul Sweeney.
And I'm Alex Steele, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
We continue with some of the best conversations from our Bloomberg Power Players event in New York. It brought together some of the most influential people in the business of sports.
Next up, a conversation with NASCAR President Steve Phelps. We discussed how NASCAR is trying to build audiences and expand outside the U.S.
We first asked Steve where we are now with NASCAR in the global sports scene.
Well, I think I would say until 2009, the growth of the sport just continued. The recession hit, and I think sponsorship started to go away because not necessarily the sport, just because of where things were with the economy. And then we had a slow, steady decline, if we're going to be completely honest, until 2018. But since 2019, attendance is up, ratings are up. We did almost a $1.1 billion per year media deal last year for 7 years, so almost $8 billion. And so I'm very bullish on where the sport is today, but importantly where it's going.
Where do you think it's going to go? Like, how does it broaden appeal? How do you get someone like me to watch it?
Sure, I think and there's the trick, right? So
and someone
I think
like me, I don't know, I don't do sports at all. I like the Olympics. I like the U.S. Open.
So I think we're trying to appeal to both, obviously, our existing audience and serve that audience, and then bring a new audience in. We're doing that through a number of different things. So, for example, we did a Netflix show earlier in the year, and that audience for us has been more female. It has been younger. And I think if you look overall in NASCAR in the last 3 years, our growth has come from women, people of color, and younger people. And so it's working, but we've got to continue to do that. The key for me is what content opportunities we have that will capture you, Alex, right? And what are the storylines we have that will capture you? And I think that's important because, I think people think of it in a way that is not right, which is you either going to serve your existing fans or you're going to go after new fans. I don't think that's true. It's an and, it's not an or. These fans, the existing fans, they want great racing, they want great storylines, they want their drivers to win, they want to see exciting racing. These people want the same thing. It's how do you capture them, right? And so I don't think the two things are all that different. It's just where are we investing our money. So, for example, we just built a $60 million productions facility right outside of Charlotte next to our R&D facility. And it's really two components to it. It's live event production. So how are we going to put our own events on for our 5 media partners going forward in 25, and then how do we create creative content and really compelling content, either to be distributed through our own channels of distribution or someone else's. So, and we've got, the 3 new media partners as part of it. So Fox and NBC came back, who are existing partners, but we added Amazon, Warner Brothers Discovery, and the CW. And the CW is for our second series, which is called the Xfinity Series. So 5 media partners, 5 opportunities for us to have, kind of a megaphone of where things are going.
It used to be, Alex, Ford cars, Chevy cars in the race. If you win on Sunday, you sell on Monday. That's how important it was. Talk to us about the economics of just the teams out there. How many teams are there? Do they make money?
Sure.
How does that work?
So I would look at it in 3 buckets, right? So we have 3 national series. The one that most people think about is our Cup Series, which is our top series. So we are coming to a close, I think, pretty quickly on something called charter extensions. So I would think of it as franchise light.
Okay.
So it's not franchised, but it creates enterprise value for our race teams. And so we are in the final throes of getting those extended. Right now, race teams, if you probably are collectively losing money. So in the charter agreement that we have based on our media deals and some other things that we're doing, we're going to provide the race teams with more revenue. So 2 pieces of revenue, guaranteed revenue, and then what they race for. And so to me, starting in 2025, we should have cash flow positive race teams, which is what we want. And I've heard lots of fans say, well, I don't really care about that. My whole point is you should
do when they
care.
go bankrupt, yeah.
Well, that's exactly, well, not only that, but it creates more compelling racing, right? And that's what we want. We need competitive racing. So we have, of our 26 races we've had this year, 15 different winners, 9 different organizations of the 15 charter organizations that we have. So and the racing's terrific. It's the best style of racing, I believe, on the planet. And I think our race fans are telling us that. So, again, ratings are up despite significant rain issues we've had all year long.
Rain, okay, yeah.
So, Daytona 500, we were down 27% because we raced on Monday.
Yep.
Coke 600 rain event down 15%. We had a race in the streets of Chicago. Rain again, down 15%. So, our 3 largest rated events of the year, all down double digit, and yet we're still positive right now for ratings. So it's working.
Just real quickly, any new markets? We've got about 30 seconds left.
Sure.
International.
So I think we are going to race next year for the first time outside of our borders in the Cup Series in Mexico City. Okay. So we have some other discussions that are going on. So we're excited about the broadening of our sport.
Our thanks to NASCAR President Steve Phelps.
Moving now to college sports, we spoke with Brittney Whiteside, Vice President of Collegiate Partnerships at Altius Partners.
We discussed the state of college sports and first asked Brittney about how the landscape is changing.
It is changing rapidly. Probably in the last 3 years, we've seen some of the most change in college sports, but also in the industry at large. We have the implementation of NIL. I'm sure you've heard of that. That's a buzzword, right? Now athletes can earn money off of their name, image, and likeness. And so when you talk about college athletics and change, and you think about that in the last 3 years, that's the biggest change. And now we're at a point where we continue to see the change. And you have the House settlement where schools may be able to now pay athletes directly. And so as you think about college athletics and the business model, it is completely shifted, and leaders across the country are preparing for that.
All right. To me, it's all about the economics. And I think most people agree that given the money behind big-time college sports, that, in fact, the athletes should be compensated for that. Yeah. The question is NIL the way? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like rudimentary at best. Yeah. There's no regulation. There's no way to ensure an even playing field. Where do we go from here? It seems like we open a Pandora's box and we have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. It is the right thing for athletes to be able to earn money off of their name, image, and likeness, so to be able to monetize that, right? NIL was the first step in that, the ability for athletes to go out and to earn income, whether that is through working with brands or in some spaces, you probably heard of collectives in this space as well, helping athletes generate money off their name, image, and likeness. Where do we go from here? we have the pending House settlement, which as we sit today, the judge will hear arguments against the fairness of that House settlement, right? House settlement is really the next step in the framework for college athletes and athletic departments to be able to share in that revenue, right? It's a revenue sharing proposal. And so in terms of next steps right now, it is the pending House settlement and next steps for athletes to be able to be paid directly from institutions versus brands and collectives and all of the other areas. And then there will be some upcoming regulation to that as well.
Right.
What about, that this is tied to a college or university is also just so odd. Like, this is like a professional business that one can be a part of, but yet you're going to be 19 years old also expecting to, like, go get your GPA and do well in school. How does all of this going to coexist?
It has coexisted now for a while, and, that was a major concern of mine early on, is how are college students going to be able to navigate this? And what we've seen is they've been able to handle it well. Some of them engage in the NIL space and do so in a way, in meaningful ways, where they're getting internships and opportunities and skill sets that they did not have the opportunity to get before. So when you think about NIL, you think about managing your brand. You think about negotiating. All of those skills are skills that you need for life. And so as part of being a student, part of that is preparing for life after, your time on campus for 4 or 5 years. And so NIL in many ways has been handled for students as a great opportunity for them to leverage their brand and be able to generate money and help prepare them for a future.
I guess the other big issue in college athletics has been the realignment of conferences, and now we've got my poor, Rutgers field hockey team sleeping on the floor of Newark Airport because they're taking a flight out to Stanford.
Yeah.
Stanford in Palo Alto. What's going on there? How is this going to evolve, do you think?
Wait, why is that bad? Why is that weird?
Because now Stanford on the West Coast is now part of the ACC
part
of the ACC.
I gotcha.
So they got to go fly from Palo Alto to Durham, North Carolina.
I get it.
And I can understand that for the football team. They're on a charter jet, all kind of same thing for basketball. But how about for like the smaller sports? How is this impacting?
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic when you think about some of the Olympic sports, right?
Yeah.
And you talked about what are some of the things that we still need to figure out. In college sports, I think that's part of it. Conference realignment as a whole, mostly driven by football schools that are competing at the highest level with schools that want to compete at the highest level. With that comes other Olympic sports that it may not make as much sense economically for them to travel or for student-athlete experience for them to travel. But when schools and institutions want to compete at the highest level, that is part of it. And so right now, many schools are having those conversations on where do we want to be in this landscape? Do we want to compete at the highest level? And if we do, that may come with your field hockey team traveling across the country to compete against the best in the country.
But then they still have to go take a test and do grades.
Yep.
That's something.
You have Wi-Fi now. They're taking
I guess
exams
that's true.
remotely.
Okay. Fair enough. What do you think that athletes could be doing better though right now?
Oh, it's such a key time for athletes to hone in on who they are, their identity, how they can manage themselves.
Because we all knew that at
brand.
19.
Right? I know, right?
Yeah.
But also they are also engaging responsibly and thinking about what are some of the brands that I work with on or a coffee shop that I always go to, a local coffee shop. How can I utilize my NIL with that local coffee shop to create a partnership, right? And so, that's how athletes are navigating it now. They're navigating at the local level, and then also they have schools that are putting resources together to help educate them on how to really navigate it in a way that is best for them.
What do you advise schools to do as they think about how to really implement an NIL and take care of their student athletes? What are you recommending as a kind of an overarching view?
Yeah, absolutely. It always starts with education. And so early on, it's educating the athletes on what NIL is, what it isn't, how to build their brand, how social media plays into this, how this entire ecosystem works. The second part of that is as a department to really hone in on your strategy. How are you going to invest in the resources for your athletes to be successful in this space? Like you would in strength and conditioning, like you would in nutrition. This is another part of the student and athlete experience that as an institution, it's your responsibility to invest in resources so athletes can really optimize their NIL while they're on their campus. And for some of the athletes, this is their time to earn
their prime
income.
time.
This is their prime time. Some are competing at a national level on TV. And so as an institution, it's how can we utilize our network, our resources, our institution IP to help athletes generate revenue and generate income for themselves.
Our thanks to Brittney Whiteside, Vice President of Collegiate Partnerships at Altius Partners.
Coming up on the program, a look at what comes next as women's soccer hits the mainstream.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio, providing in-depth research and data on 2,000 companies and 130 industries. You can access Bloomberg Intelligence via BI Go on the terminal. I'm Paul Sweeney.
And I'm Alex Steele, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
We continue with some of the best conversations from our Bloomberg Power Players event in New York. It brought together some of the world's most influential voices in the business of sports.
Next up, a conversation with Jessica Berman, Commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. She joined to give us some insight on women's soccer as it hits the mainstream.
We first asked Jessica to talk to us about the state of the National Soccer League.
In the last 2.5 years, it is true, I think women's sports and the National Women's Soccer League in particular has exploded. We've reached this inflection point where it is no longer a question whether investing in women's sports is a good business investment. And because of that, the money has followed. And we're looking at our ownership group across all of our teams, 14 teams across the country, and we have the right capital and strategic investors around the table to really build for the future. Talk about our recent announcement this morning. Bob Iger and Will Obey are now the control owners. It is a boom. It is a mic drop. Are now the controlling owners of Angel City, which are the highest enterprise value women's sports team in the world.
Oh, wow.
Traded for $250 million. And, you know, this is a league that launched 12 years ago. Angel City is only 3 years old.
Los Angeles,
If you put that side by side with the men's leagues that have been around for decades, some more than 100 years, it's really incredible to see the amount of growth. We also announced that Magic Johnson is an investor in the Washington Spirit with Michelle Kang. So the type of owners who are coming to the table to really invest in this is really driven by the future vision of a view that we really can be the best league in the world. And because of the backdrop, as you mentioned, of women's soccer, it's just an incredible moment to be part of witnessing this growth.
Well, I was going to ask as to the why now part of it. Is it because you've had, super good success with some amazing players in the game? I also, as a finance nerd, am going to go back to the Fed had zero interest rates for a really long time. There was a lot of money that needed to be put to work, that needed a good return because you couldn't put it in the bond market, that kind of stuff. What are you hearing as to why people with money think this is a good investment now?
I think if you look on a longitudinal basis, particularly at men's sports as a parallel, over the course of decades, it outperforms every other asset class on a long-term basis. And so you've often seen investors who are long-range in their thinking around putting capital to work invest in sports and see incredible returns. If you look at that compared to the product of women's soccer, there really is no reason why we should not be as successful as men's sports, particularly in a sport that has the backdrop of when you think of success and soccer in the U.S., you actually think of women first. And that really creates a unique value proposition that has really woken up the investment community to say, if we look at men's sports and the way that they've grown in enterprise value on an exponential basis over decades, and we are at the inception of our growth, there's very few things in the world that you can get in at the ground level. I think we're definitely beyond the ground level, but we're certainly nowhere near the top of our hockey stick growth.
Media rights, it's the big driver of global sports valuations globally. What's the media strategy for U.S. the Soccer League?
Yeah, we signed a landmark media deal and announced it in November of 2023. We got a collective $250 million invested into our league from the combination of CBS, ESPN, Amazon, and Scripps Ion. And in addition to that incredible investment in our league, which allow us to put those resources to work to grow the league, we've also made the very important strategic decision to also invest in ourselves and ensure that our games are viewable and discoverable on platforms that are national in scope and scale. And so from last year to this year, we went from 6 games being available on national broadcast to over 120.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So now when you are sitting on your couch, which some people still do, and channel surf, which some people still do, you will find our games. And if you were watching the U.S. Open, which I was, and there was a promo ad to tell everyone that you can watch on ESPN, we are in the places and spaces where people consume live content, and that will help us to catalyze the growth of our audience.
Our thanks to Jessica Berman, Commissioner of National Women's Soccer League. We continue with women's soccer. We got more insight on the game and conversation with Midge Purce, a forward for the New Jersey, New York Gotham Football Club and the United States women's national soccer team.
And we first asked Midge if women's soccer is finally having its moment.
I don't know if I can subscribe to that, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, tell me.
It's because every 4 years we have the Olympics and we have the World Cup, and everyone gets really, really excited about women's soccer, and then it usually dissipates at some point. I do think women's sports in general are having an incredible moment. I mean, you can see it with the WNBA, you even see it with like rugby and track. I'm with you. I believe in it, but I want to wait to see it before I subscribe.
You've been on the national teams, the U.S. national teams for years, so you've seen the global competition. But the U.S. team is in my opinion, I don't know, I'm not that into it, the best team for a long time globally in terms of looking at the World Cups and so on. Talk to us about the growth of soccer internationally outside the U.S. What are you seeing in terms of competitiveness? Because I know there are a lot of international players in the U.S. League.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think you can see it even with the last World Cup we had. We won this Olympic gold, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think anyone who watched the games could see that they were difficult games. It wasn't 6-0, it wasn't 5-0, it wasn't 3-0. A couple Germany games were in our favor. But in general, it's the competition is leveling out, and you know, the global stage is getting a lot more even. So I think even seeing a lot of those players come over to our league and increase the competitiveness that we have here at home, it's really amazing to see the progression of women's sports globally.
What do you think of the how to monetize that, like as a player? Like we talked to the commissioner, we talked to a partner that sort of helps collegiate athletes monetize themselves and understand how to do that and works with them, works with colleges. Do you think this is all being done the right way?
No.
This is great. This is why I want to talk to someone who actually does the stuff.
In short, no, I don't. I think that we're still behind in terms of the industry approach on how we support players, help players, and promote players. I think one of the biggest issues I've had with women's sports in general is that the landscape for how we market women's sports has always been extremely derivative with the landscape of how we market men's sports. And
that
even
is shocking.
Yeah, they say shrink it and pink it is something that Michelle King likes to say, and I'll take that from her. But it's not even just derivative of the men's game, but we're derivative of the European format as well. And, you know, the American population, this demographic, it's a different audience that you need to cater to. And I think we need to be just a little bit more specific industry-wide with how we do that.
How do you expect the growth of the league to be over the next several years? Do you expect it to get more competitive, maybe more teams? What do the players feel like?
Oh, I don't think anything's going to stop this league, to be completely honest. I think we will be huge competitors with the MLS. I do see a lot more teams coming in. I think more international players will want to come play here, and I think it's going to be even harder to play here domestically.
Right.
What about, like, do you think we're going to have, like, competitions, not like the Olympics or whatever, World Cup, where, like, you can play more internationally and make it not just like a U.S. soccer sport?
Absolutely. I think we have the Club World Cup that's happening. So it's definitely we are integrating with other leagues and making that global community for women's soccer.
Our thanks to Midge Purce, forward for the New Jersey, New York Gotham Football Club and the United States women's national soccer team. We move now to a conversation with Grant Hill, Managing Director for USA Basketball and co-owner of the Atlanta Hawks.
He took a behind-the-scenes look at the big talent and big personalities who brought home the gold for the women's and men's U.S. basketball teams.
We first asked Grant to talk to us about the current state of Team USA.
It's an exciting time, and obviously I succeeded Jerry Colangelo, who, along with Coach K, had an incredible run together starting in 2006. And I came in during this sort of Olympic quad. We had our World Cup last summer. We didn't fare as well in the World Cup. The women won the gold medal in their World Cup. But the Olympics were absolutely incredible. And both teams were pushed. They were tested. There was just excellence on the court all over the world. We saw Serbia in our semifinal games. They were so worthy and deserving of winning, came up short.
Yeah, I saw that one.
You saw that one?
Yeah, I did. See? Okay.
But it was just phenomenal. I mean, the fact that we got tested, we got pushed, we had to show some fight and some toughness collectively to win that game, but also win the gold medal against France. The women's team got pushed, and a very close, tough matchup they had in the gold medal game with France as well. So I think it was just a win-win, not just for USA basketball and our continued excellence, but it was a win-win for basketball universally. Like, I think all across the globe, if you're a fan of the game, the Olympic basketball scene was spectacular.
And even if you don't know the game or watch the game normally, like, I was totally into it.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was really great. Talk to me about investing. And where do you see opportunities? I know that you and your wife are also investors in the Orlando Pro women's soccer team, and we were talking about that as to where the opportunity set is, sort of where women's soccer is going to go.
Look, so I have two daughters who are jocks, who are athletes, and so yes, and I think sort of through them, really getting exposed to women's sports and really wanting them to see women professional athletes. So whether it was the WNBA or the NWSL, we live in Orlando, we were fans and consumers at first. And we got so caught into it and just loving it and having a passion for these teams. We also saw the potential and the upside for growth. And so the opportunity to invest in the NWSL, the Orlando Pride, we're in first place right now. Yay. We haven't not lost a game. We've had a few ties and all wins. But I just feel the momentum is really growing. And now you have superior leadership. Jessica Berman is a fantastic commissioner, has great vision, can execute that vision, has surrounded herself with a solid team. But also we have professional ownership now. We have owners now who own other sports, who've been in this, who understand it, see the long-term trajectory of the business. And so I wouldn't say we're at an inflection point right now, but I think we have long-term positioned ourselves nicely for great success. And I think of all the sports leagues, I really believe this. I think the NWSL has the greatest upside. And so really excited. I was excited to see Jessica and Midge Purce, one of the stars in the league.
We talked to her too.
And we're thrilled to be involved.
Our thanks to Grant Hill, Managing Director for USA Basketball and co-owner of the Atlanta Hawks.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.